a medium hauler that flies under the radar, a ship that in many ways feels just as much a living being as it does a mechanical vessel. The recently released Esperia Prowler utility is CIG's latest entry into the selection of ships inspired by the Tavaran, and it reimagines the legendary stealth craft as a versatile, combat-capable hauling platform, blending Tavaran design philosophy with modern utility applications, which is perfect for operators who value discretion, adaptability, and style rooted in ancient tradition. Today, we're diving headfirst into the Prowler utility to determine whether or not this mishmash of old design and new tech is up to par with other crafts in its class, and more importantly, whether or not it deserves a spot in your fleet. Welcome back everyone to ForgeCore Gaming. I'm your host Phoenix, and this is my honest review of the Esperia Prowler utility. Before we get started, I'd like to ask that you hit that subscribe button if you enjoy insightful Star Citizen content. We recently passed 4,000 subscribers, and we have our pips set on 6,000 before we reach the end of the year. Also, leave us a like to help the YouTube algorithm push this content out to more citizens who may be looking for answers just like you. Finally, we've recently partnered up with theimpound.com, so if you enjoy getting discounts on ships in Star Citizen, be sure to check out the link in the description for the impound. Using that link does get you a small discount from the most trusted gray market ship seller in the Star Citizen ecosystem. Just a heads up, using that link also benefits this channel in a small way. No pressure of course though, as we at ForgeCore are huge proponents of the fact that most ships in Star Citizen can be earned for free just by playing the game. Now without further ado, let's get into it. I'd like to start this review off by stating I'm not the biggest fan of alien ships. To put it plainly, they simply aren't my style. In fact, the Prowler utility is the first alien ship that I've used for more than 15 minutes since the start of my Star Citizen career. With that said, I promise to be objective here and primarily focus on facts when it comes to my score later on in the video. Now, per the usual format, we're starting off with a look around the exterior of the ship, after which we'll move on to the interior. Beginning with the front, the hull design around the bridge or cockpit to me resembles a sort of beak or facial structure of a bird of prey, which personally, coupled with the ship's aggressive posture, gives it a rather imposing presence. It doesn't come off as a beast ready for battle, but more so like one that has already claimed victory. Moving slightly to the rear of the port side, we have access to one of the two ship entrances by way of a retractable ladder, which is flanked on either side by what appears to be some sort of anti-gravity type thrusters. Just behind that, we find ourselves at the first of two ribcage style cargo grids that, in my opinion, have the most interesting opening and closing animation of any ship in the game. And if we move slightly outward from there, we see the port side front landing gear, which is monstrous in proportion to the ship, and is clad interestingly in layers of geometric panels formed together to give an almost organic form. Moving back further still, we approach the rear of the ship, which supports two giant stabilizing wings on either side of the rear entrance ramp. And if we wrap around to the starboard side, we see the same design mirrored almost exactly, save for the lack of the front ladder entrance. From here, we can start making our way inside via the rear entrance ramp, and as we do, we're met with a deep red ambient glow from lighting positioned at several locations around the first room, the cargo bay. You can also take note of the unique cargo grid that opens on both the left and right sides independently of one another, each side supporting up to 16 SCU of cargo. As we enter the next room, we see a gun rack capable of holding up to 4 long primary weapons up to a sniper rifle in size, so that's good. And opposite of that, there's another rack that I couldn't really figure out what it's for, as anything I put in my hands was deemed an inappropriate item. Further forward from here, we have 4 stand-up jump seats for passengers, and the entire hull is tied together with a white light from up above, utilizing similar geometric patterns as the rest of the ship. At the very front of this hull is a seat labeled the co-pilot seat, and from here you can enter the remote turret that's located at the top of the ship equipped with 2 size 3 guns, or you can access the ship's remote turret tractor beam that's located on the underbelly of the ship, but is stowed when not in use. From the seat you also have full access to ship power, and once powered up you can enable the viewport that sort of digitally morphs into what seems to be a screen that allows you to see outside. Now you also have access to controls as well as the 2 size 4 guns affixed to the wings. If we leave the seat and head upstairs, using this ladder, we can immediately find a dedicated engineering room towards the rear of the ship, as well as a number of store components along the walls near the ladder. One problem I have with this design is the same one I have with the Redeemer, in that if you need to replace components manually in the future when engineering comes out, then you have to move them up and down that narrow chute where the ladder is located. Personally, I would have preferred the components to be located on the lower level in lieu of those 4 jump seats, but I'm sure there's a reason why they are where they are. At the front of this room, we have a seat labeled pilot seat, which as expected is where you're allegedly intended to fly the ship from, but I believe this is a mislabeling of seats due to this seat's proximity to the engineering room, and the fact that by default, you do not have access to all 4 weapons on the ship, unlike the seat that's designated as the co-pilot seat. On top of that, I would much prefer the downstairs seat to be for the pilot, simply for the fact that you don't have to traverse another level of the ship just to control it. As I stated, I suspect this is a mislabeling of seats, and the downstairs co-pilot position is actually intended to be used by the ship's primary pilot. That about does it for the tour of the ship. Let's go ahead and jump into a quick stat review before we do our practical field testing. Starting with the DPS, the utility comes stock with 2 size 4 Light Strike 4 laser cannons and 2 size 3 deadbolts that give it a DPS of 1602, but of course you can maximize that by switching to Ardors or Attritions if you're into that kind of thing, and bring the sustained DPS all the way up to 2716, very respectable. As far as shields go, the Prowler comes stock with 4 Grade C stealth shields, which I wouldn't change as stealth is one of this ship's primary selling points, and with that loadout, the shield HP comes out to 11,560 HP in a bubble configuration, which to be honest really isn't bad. Now the Prowler does come with a couple party tricks in the passive bonus department. In addition to a 50% physical damage reduction bonus, presumably due to its armor, it also boasts some of the highest electromagnetic, IR, and physical cross-section reduction bonus I've seen so far in the game, which makes for insanely low signatures, especially when you consider its size. With its stock EM, IR, and cross-section signatures being 4.1k, 3.3k, and 4.2k respectively on the stock loadout. And when it comes to flight characteristics, the Prowler is pretty fast for its size, with a top SEM speed of 208 meters per second unboosted and 437 meters per second boosted. In nav mode, it can reach up to speeds of 1,110 meters per second. When it comes to pitch yaw and roll, the Prowler can maneuver at 35, 30, 100 degrees per second respectively, which again isn't bad at all for its size. Speaking of which, when it comes to dimensions, the Prowler utility comes in at 32 meters wide, 34 meters long, and 15 meters tall, which puts it in a weird spot as far as size goes, as I wasn't really able to find anything that was super close to the same size, and that's because, unlike most ships, the Prowler utility is almost as wide as it is long. As far as hauling capacity goes, the maximum you can carry on the cargo grid is 32 SCUs, which I'll admit was a bit disappointing when you consider the fact that this is dubbed a medium freighter, but I'll give it a bit of a pass due to the fact that, in my opinion, this is a niche hauler pick stemming from its really low detectability range. Its fuel capacity, however, leans more towards the high performer side, as the Prowler carries 43 SCUs of hydrogen fuel and 2.25 SCUs of quantum fuel, putting it above average for vehicles in the size 3 class. If you need to claim your Prowler, the default time is 21 minutes and can be expedited down to 5 minutes and 15 seconds for a fee of 9,200 AUEC, which is both a bit high and a bit expensive, but that's just basing it on other ships in this class. Now that we're done with the stat overview, let's field test this thing and then start drawing some conclusions of this ship overall. Now, top of my list for testing was determining just how easily this thing carries cargo, so I grabbed some simple hauling contracts from Bikini Point and pulled the cargo up in the elevator. When it came to evaluating this, I took 3 different approaches. First, I wanted to look at how well, if at all, the Prowler utility could hold an Atlas, just in case we wanted to add a kick of efficiency to our loadout. I'm sad to report that my 2 attempts to snap it to the grid ended with the Atlas being glitched into the ship and disappearing. So for that, we're going to consider a non-starter with bringing an Atlas along. So then I decided to try it out by hand and see how smoothly that went, and for the most part, it went pretty well. Much like the raft, you only have to get the boxes kinda near the grid and they'll snap right to it, even if they're barely off the ground. Now the downside of using hand tools to loading the Prowler is similar to the Starlancer Max, in that the cargo grid is split, so if you want to load both sides, you have to back the ship up so you're not walking all the way around to access the other half. Problem with this is, the 2 rear stabilizing wings kind of block the path you would be moving boxes in. It's definitely not a deal breaker, it's simply an inconvenience that you have to deal with. Otherwise, loading it by hand wasn't bad at all. Third, I tried out the ship tractor beam, which worked better than expected. At first, I was a bit annoyed because both the ship entry ladder and the landing gear were in the way, but you can easily overcome that by weaving boxes around them. And I could even swing boxes around to the side that wasn't facing the cargo elevator. Best part of this was that I never had to leave the quote-unquote co-pilot seat in order to grab cargo, load it, or maneuver the ship. For me, this is a really well thought out cargo loading workflow, where the only serious downside would be the cargo capacity itself. Now, a ship review wouldn't be complete without a flight and combat test, so I queued up an offline pirate swarm, changed my gun loadout a bit, and got ready to fight. Here's what I found. In a lot of ways, the Prowler utility fights a lot like the Redeemer. You have similar maneuverability, and you have the exact same pilot-controlled guns, those being 2 size 4s and 2 size 3s. The only difference for a solo pilot is the fact that the utility has no missiles, but keeping things fair, I hardly ever use missiles anyways, so we'll give it a pass. With that said, that doesn't mean this thing is a terribly efficient killer, but it also isn't bad. Allow me to elaborate. In PvE scenarios, this ship does just fine. It certainly won't be taking home any trophies in a PvP environment, as it's just too slow to maneuver, even under boost, and can easily be overcome by faster and more nimble fighters. With that said, it does have a decent HP pool and a healthy hull HP pool at 69,300. Once I got used to its maneuvering rate, I was able to disable most small fighters in a single pass. I was also able to put myself in a semi-advantageous position against ships like the Cutlass Black, and was fully able to cut strafe and sit on top of a Corsair's pancake or largest physical cross-section. Now, I fully expected to get to the Hammerhead phase of Pirate Swarm and hit a full stop, but to my surprise, the stealthiness and low detectability range of the Prowler actually came in very handy here and did a ton of heavy lifting. Obviously, a single Prowler utility doesn't stand a chance against an AI-crewed Hammerhead when it comes to a DPS race, but I noticed early on that if I kept my distance right around 2.5 to 2.8 kilometers out, I was able to land shots and the Hammerhead didn't even know I was there. Albeit, that's a very delicate line to walk, and on more than one occasion I had to go into nav mode and run away, which was a little bit frustrating given that the enemy Hammerhead was able to get its shields up in that time. And I'll admit, I did die one time doing this little song and dance, but in the end I was able to take the Hammerhead out, which is not something that I expected. Now obviously, this was an ideal scenario where my only combatant was an enemy Hammerhead. I wouldn't put my odds of doing this during an ERT level bounty very high, and that's simply due to the fact that there would be incoming fire from all directions. Even still, I was pleasantly surprised that I was able to complete it, so I have to give it passing marks here. Now when it comes to flyability, obviously this isn't what you would call zippy or quick in any direction or rotational vector, but it felt smooth and controllable all the time. And don't tell my org, but I actually enjoyed using it during Pirate Swarm for the most part. It isn't all positive though, as I'm not a fan of the UI on this one, namely because of all the red. To my surprise, even valid quantum markers are red in this ship, which was a little bit of a brain buster for me when I first started to fly it in the PU, because in my mind, red means no when it comes to quantum travel. So I may or may not have tried for several minutes to debug what I thought was a bad quantum route. Might not be a problem for you if this is the only ship you fly, but for the rest of us, it just feels kinda dumb. Now that red continued to be a problem during Pirate Swarm, as there was this inexplicable red glow emanating from the center console/dashboard area that made it weirdly difficult to see certain things. I'm pretty sure I was not on the cusp of G'ing out because I don't think I was moving even remotely fast enough to do so. Overall, all of that red just fatigued my eyes and focus, mostly because I'm used to using the color coding present on nearly every other ship in order to identify objectives. At some point, all of the red targets and indicators just started to blend for me. Now I want to be clear, alien ships still are not my style, though the Prowler utility, in my opinion, does make a pretty good case for anyone thinking of getting into that market. For me, it has a lot of good aspects to it. It has a decent cargo grid for looting ships and POIs, not so much if your plan is to do actual cargo hauling though. 32 SCU simply isn't enough to make that worth your time. B, the loading and unloading workflow is super easy courtesy of being able to pilot the ship and access the tractor beam, plus both halves of the ship's cargo grid, all from the convenience of a single operator seat. C, this thing is super stealthy. Detection range aside, the low emissions and cross-section levels also mean it's really easy to distract inbound missiles with decoys, given the fact that one single decoy masks every signature this ship has. Big win, many wows. Now those are just my top 3, but there are certainly other cool aspects of this ship. On the other hand though, there are also some downsides. No ship is perfect. And for me, those downsides are the following. A, it has no habitation area, and I really don't care if you're sitting there thinking that not all ships have to have habitation areas. Personally, I think any ship medium size or above absolutely should have one. For me, I'd remove those jump seats that they insist on putting in so many ships and put the hab there. Doesn't have to be anything crazy, just give me something. B, the cargo grid, in my opinion, is small. 32 SEUs on a hauler this size is just subpar. I get it, it isn't meant for heavy cargo hauling, or even decent cargo hauling, but 32 SEUs is just tiny in the realm of haulers. C, no vehicles can be brought along with it, which, okay, I guess really isn't a deal breaker, but it does remove any capacity for expanded utility that a lot of other ships in the verse have. It relegates this to being a specialist as a niche pick, just a little bit too much for me. D, they need to tone down the red in there. I get it, it's a mood, it's alien, okay, but at some point, we have to think about usability, and the red really kills a lot of that for me. But that's just my opinion. I'm sure some of you guys and gals out there love that. I just don't. So before I give my score here, I would like to point out the price. Currently, the Prowler utility cannot be purchased in game. It's still too new. But it can be purchased in the cash shop for $300, which for me feels a little bit expensive for something that has so few use cases. It isn't a heavy hitter in any arena other than stealth, which in my experience isn't something you lean on in most cases. Maybe it would if I PvP'd more often or engaged in pirating. As I mentioned earlier, it's a niche pick all the way, and for me, if I'm going stealth, I'm probably bringing something faster and more suited for fighting. But again, that's just my opinion. Drop a comment with what you would use the Prowler utility stealth characteristics for. I'd love to hear from you. Now let's get to scoring this thing. When it comes to versatility and usefulness, I'm going to give this ship a solid 6 out of 10. Technically, it can participate in multiple gameplay loops, it just can't do any of them particularly well. When it comes to aesthetics, though it isn't my style, I'm going to give it a solid 7.5 out of 10, and that's simply for the creativity. And on the fun factor, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10, and that's because, though I enjoyed using it in Pirate Swarm, after a while it just becomes annoying to keep consciously differentiating between which red icon on my screen is the one I should focus on. And that brings our average out to 6.5 out of 10, but I have to give this one a little bit more of an edge because of the insanely low emissions and cross-section signatures it has, which I think is enough to earn it a bump of 0.5, bringing our total out to a 7 out of 10, which is a good score and higher than I anticipated I would give it. And that about sums up the review. Let me know your thoughts down below, I'd love to hear from you. Also drop a comment with what ship you'd like to see reviewed next. I have a backlog of ships I want to take a look at, but there are only so many hours in a day, so I'd like to hear your thoughts about what I should prioritize. With that said, I think I'll end the video. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you enjoyed this review, and hit the like button to let YouTube know you appreciate the work we do here at ForgeCore. As always, thank you all very much for watching, fly safe out there, and I'll see you in the verse. Phoenix out.